Hello, and welcome to the Quality Parenting Initiative training. My name is Rachel Helton, and I am a trainer here at Kids Central in Circuit 5. Today, I will be facilitating your training on excellent parenting and respectful partnership. I would like to welcome all child welfare professionals, resource parents, relatives, and fictive kin placements to this training. The goal for this session is to build strong and supportive caregiver, birth, or legal parent and child welfare professional relationships in order to reduce trauma to children and ensure that children thrive. At the end of this course, you will be able to describe the Quality Parenting Initiative approach and the requirements of excellent parenting, describe the importance of information sharing among caregivers, families, professionals, and youth involved in dependency, explain the importance of using evidence-based psychosocial and child development principles to best support children and families, explore policy guidance to eliminate unplanned placement moves, understand how to implement improved, planful transitions, including initial placements into foster care, transitions within the foster care system, and exiting the foster care system. Gain clarity of Florida's transition policies and guidelines that support healthy attachment and child development. Identify the elements and expectations of transition meetings. Develop strategies to support implementation of comfort calls to parents and caregivers whenever a child enters a new home or placement. Understand policy guidelines that require comfort calls. And explore practice guidelines for comfort calls to support children. The information that I will be reviewing today is broken down into 3 sections. The first section is the Quality Parenting Initiative approach and the requirements for excellent parenting. The second section is planful transitions, and the third section is comfort calls. Section 1, Quality Parenting Initiative approach and the requirements for excellent parenting. The QPI approach to foster care is based on the idea that the most important task for the system is to develop and maintain supportive relationships for the child, especially the parenting relationship. QPI is an approach, a philosophy, and a network of sites that share information and ideas about how to improve parenting as well as recruit and retain excellent families. It is an effort to rebrand foster care, not simply by changing a logo or an advertisement, but by changing the expectations of and support for caregivers. The child welfare system commits to fully supporting excellent parenting by putting the needs of the child first. We stand by our belief that excellent parenting and strong, secure, healthy relationships are critical to healthy development, which gives the child the best possible opportunity for success. A child in foster care shall be placed only with a caregiver who has the ability to care for the child, is willing to accept responsibility for providing care, is willing and able to learn about and be respectful of the child's culture, religion, and ethnicity, special physical or psychological needs, any circumstances unique to the child, and family relationships. The child welfare system must ensure that the foster or relative family caring for the child provides the loving, committed, and skilled care that the child needs while working effectively with the system to reach the child's long-term goals. QPI believes that the system can improve only if the consumers, children, birth parents, foster parents, frontline practitioners, caseworkers, supervisors, and foster parents can share their experiences and concerns and help design solutions. The key elements of the QPI approach are 1, defining the expectations of caregivers, 2, clearly communicating expectations to staff, caregivers, and other stakeholders, and 3, aligning system policy and practice with those expectations. When QPI is successful, caregivers have a voice. They work as a team with agency staff to support children and youth. Caregivers receive the support and training they need to work with children and families, understand what is expected of them, and know what to expect from the system. Systems are then able to select and retain enough excellent caregivers to meet the needs of each child for a home and family. When these changes are accomplished, outcomes for children, youth, and families will improve. All caregivers and professionals must understand and support the 4 key components of QPI: respected partners, nurturing children, supporting families, and strengthening communities. So to start on respected partners, this means that information is shared, we value each person's role on the team, we listen to each other, and we also recognize each person's strengths and views, challenges as opportunities for growth. Nurturing children means that we get to know each child, we recognize each child's strengths and needs, we maintain connections as much as possible, and ensure that children engage in normal activities, and to ensure we support each child. Supporting families means we recognize that each family has strengths and needs. We provide opportunities for our families to make decisions. We provide opportunities for professional growth. We make sure we offer continuous support. And most importantly, we make sure that we communicate openly. Strengthening communities means we involve the entire community in supporting families. Strong families make strong communities. Community members from all walks of life are engaged, and that the system that supports families becomes more informed. The 5 core principles of QPI are excellent parenting is the most important service we can provide to children and youth in care. Children need families, not beds. Child development and trauma research indicates that children need constant, consistent, effective parenting to grow and reach their full potential. Each community must define excellent parenting for itself. Policy and practice must be changed to align with that definition, and participants in the system are in the best position to recommend and implement that change. Since the QPI stands firm in believing that every child deserves excellent parents, QPI has developed a set of requirements to define what excellent parenting looks like. These requirements provide a roadmap for parents and systems. Excellent parenting requires 1. Enough foster parents or kin who are willing and able to care for children. For this to occur, systems must invest in building a team of caregivers who believe that all children deserve excellent parenting. Caring for children means supporting them, loving them, teaching them, and advocating for what is best for them. 2. A system that supports this parenting. The system itself must be willing to align policies and practices to support excellent parenting. Foster parents and kin must be respected as partners within the system and included in decision making. And 3, a system that supports the child's lifelong relationships. The system must encourage parenting relationships and be open to allowing natural supports to nurture each child. Systems must expand opportunities for children to communicate and spend time with those with whom they feel connected. Florida statute supports excellent parenting. Florida statute section 409-1415, subsection 2, subsection B, subsection 3, states that a caregiver must strive to provide, and the Department of Community-Based Care lead agency must support excellent parenting, which includes a loving commitment to the child and the child's safety and well-being, appropriate supervision and positive methods of discipline, encouragement of the child's strengths, respect for the child's individuality and likes and dislikes, providing opportunities to develop the child's interests and skills, being aware of the impact of trauma on behavior, facilitating equal participation of the child in family life, involving the child within his or her community, and a commitment to enable the child to lead a normal life. So what is the underlying principle of the new law? Well, in keeping with national trends, it is the intent of the legislator to bring caregivers and birth or legal parents together in order to build strong relationships that lead to more successful reunifications and more stability for children being fostered in out-of-home care. The new law is relationship focused. This means that it focuses on the importance of attachment and stability. It takes relationships into account when a move is recommended, requires supportive relationships between birth parents and caregivers, including initial calls, meetings, and involvement in visitation, which must be included in the case plan, requires a caregiver's report at court review, supports continued contact between a child and caregiver after the child leaves the home, and requires a developmentally appropriate transition plan. In order to ensure that children in out-of-home care achieve legal permanency as soon as possible, to reduce the likelihood that they will re-enter care or that other children in the family are abused or neglected or enter out-of-home care, and to assure that families are fully prepared to resume custody of their children, the department and community-based care lead agencies shall develop and support relationships between caregivers and birth or legal parents of children in out-of-home care, to the extent that it is safe and in the child's best interest. We do this by facilitating telephone communication between the caregiver and the birth or legal parent as soon as possible after the child is placed in the home of the caregiver. Facilitating and attending an in-person meeting between the caregiver and the birth or legal parent as soon as possible after the child is placed in the home of the caregiver. Developing and supporting a plan for the birth or legal parent to participate in medical appointments, educational and extracurricular activities, and other events involving the child. Facilitating participation by the caregiver in visitation between the birth or legal parent and the child. Involving the caregiver in planning meetings with the birth or legal parent. Developing and implementing effective transition plans for the child's return home or placement in any other living environment. And supporting continued contact between the caregiver and the child after the child returns home or moves to another permanent living arrangement. Florida Statute Section 409-1415, subsection 2B4, states that a child in out-of-home care must be placed with a caregiver who has the ability to care for the child, is willing to accept responsibility for providing care, is willing and able to learn about and be respectful of the child's culture, religion, and ethnicity, special physical or psychological needs, circumstances unique to the child, and family relationships. The department, the community-based care lead agency, and other agencies must provide a caregiver with all available information necessary to assist the caregiver in determining whether he or she is able to appropriately care for a particular child. The science of child development and attachment is an important component of QPI and Florida legislation and best practice. QPI is based on the idea that we can use developmental research to improve individual parenting and change the system to facilitate healthy development. QPI beliefs about what youth deserve do not waver. Although systems may shift policies and practices, beliefs are fundamental. QPI believes in the following developmental research and concepts. Lifelong consequences. A child's experiences with systems can have lifelong cognitive, social, emotional, and biological consequences. Early trauma and interventions matter. The earlier in life children experience trauma, the more serious the impact. However, it's not hopeless. One caregiver. Children biologically and emotionally need a stable, secure relationship with one or more caregivers. Caregiver absence. The absence of a responsive, supportive caregiver is likely to have the greatest long-term consequences for a child. Disrupting relationship. Systems should minimize or eliminate relationship disruptions and avoid frequent caregiver transitions. Grief. Children, including infants who are separated from their primary caregiver, grieve the loss of their caregiver. Understanding signals. Children who have experienced maltreatment and early disruptions in care tend to do the opposite of what they need and push caregivers and adults away. Caregiver investment. Caregivers of children who have experienced trauma must be nurturing, consistent, responsive, and have a high level of psychological commitment and investment in the child. Caregiver behavior. To protect children adequately, the foster parent must become the primary caregiver and primary attachment figure. The quality of the relationship forms the basis for a child's sense of self, feelings of worthiness, and trust in others. Attachment as a relationship. Young children or children who are young developmentally cannot sustain relationships without regular direct contact. Infant vulnerability. Young children in foster care are especially vulnerable due to the combined effects of the developmental importance of attachment, maltreatment, relationship disruption, and caregiver transitions. Teen brains impact behavior. Adolescent actions are guided more by the emotional and reactive amygdala and less by the thoughtful, logical frontal cortex. Teens grow out of many behaviors given the right environment and opportunities. Relationships, regulation, and reward. Adolescent brains have three particular activity areas: relationships, the importance of nurturing magnified; regulation requires positive experiences; and reward, more receptive to reward-based learning. Neuroplasticity. With the right nurturing experiences, the adolescent brain can be rewired to heal from an earlier trauma. Not too late. The single most important factor for youth resiliency is whether important adults believe in them, love them unconditionally, and hold them to high expectations. Systems must incorporate youth development building blocks of resilience: competence, confidence, connection, character, contribution, coping, and control. Individualized. Services and supports must be individualized to the needs and the specific situation of child. Plans should be revised during different phases and will have different meanings over time. Child well-being dictates. Adults should bear the burden of difficulties in meeting these principles, not children or youth. If someone must get hurt, it should not be the child. Systems must stop thinking of child custody as a reward or punishment. Attachment is a relationship, not a permanent status for young children.
Anyway, so Carol, who gives out these easy tasks, says, so I'd like you to talk about the principles from developmental science that are important for child welfare, and you can have 5 minutes. So there we go. There are two lines of research that I think are especially critical for the work that you do. And by the way, I just want to start by saying, if you're in this room, I'm a huge fan, because the work that you do is incredibly tough and incredibly important. It's hard to think of jobs that are more important than the jobs of the people in this room. So I'm just starting from the place of having enormous appreciation for how tough it is and how important it is. But thinking about why is it what do we know from developmental science that addresses the question of why do children need quality parenting every day? That's the question. So the first line of research I'm going to talk about is brain development, and then I'm going to mention briefly attachment. So important thing to know about brain development is that brains are constructed over time. And that's critically important because what that means is that it allows for experiences that the individual has to affect how the brain is constructed. And what that does is it confers the ability to adapt to very different kinds of circumstances to individuals. So the fact that it's constructed over time is really important. There are threats that the two-edged swords of this is there are threats to brain development. So when individuals are raised in really adverse conditions, there's the possibility that their brains may not be constructed in a healthy way. And that can happen because they don't get critically important input that they need at certain times, or because they are exposed to violence or threat at a time that compromises their brain development. So, to sum up what we know about the most important factors for healthy brain development, it turns out it's caregiving relationships, of all things. That's the most important ingredient to healthy brain development. And relationship-based interventions, and I'm including foster care as one of the most important relationship-based interventions, are increasingly demonstrated to have very important implications for preventing long-term adverse outcomes in young children. The other thing to know is that the brain develops over time, but its development is most active early on and becomes increasingly less active later on. So the brain's ability to change decreases over time. So you have maximum capacity for change early and diminishing over time. And the effort, both physiologically at the cellular level and economically and practically, the effort to produce changes becomes increasingly difficult over time. So if we can get a young child's brain to develop in a healthy way and get the foundation laid in a healthy way, then that child is going to be in much better shape than the child who spends long amounts of time in adverse conditions, and then later we're trying to remediate it. So it's never too late. I don't want, this can be overstated, the importance of early experiences, but it is important to know that we have diminishing returns and increasing efforts and increasing costs at the individual level and at the society level when things take more time. Okay, so that's all the neuroscience we're going to do today, I promise. Okay, so the other line of research that I hope you're familiar with is research on parent-child attachment. And what we mean by attachment is the young child's tendency to seek comfort, support, nurturance, and protection from a relatively small number of people, and to get comfort in response to that. It sounds very simple. It's so simple that it's easy to take for granted and easy not to recognize how critically important that is. Because from those experiences of having a need and having someone respond to a need, and not just anyone, but someone who you come to trust and count on to be there for you, has profound implications for the developmental trajectory that that child is on. And when that goes well, that child will be protected against other adversities. And when it doesn't go well, the child's at substantially increased risk. So what we know is that infants are born strongly biologically predisposed to form attachments. Adults are also strongly biologically predisposed to respond to the needs of young children. and that attachment develops gradually over the first few years of life, and the quality of those relationships is based on the experiences that the child has with those individual caregivers. So attachment forms over the first year of life. It's present in the second half of the first year of life, 7 to 9 months, and we know it's present when the child develops stranger wariness and separation protest. Those are terms you may have heard of. And once the child has the capacity to form attachments, the child can form attachments to anyone who spends substantial amounts of time caring for the child. Now, why does it matter? It matters because the child develops expectations. This is how the child learns about how social relationships work, from these early experiences about the availability and dependability of other people. And the quality of the child's attachment to their primary caregivers early in life is a very strong predictor of their subsequent social and psychological development. Now, what's critical to understand is how attachment forms. It forms not because the baby gets a memo that says, okay, this is who you're attached to, but because the baby has an experience of needing something and someone responds. When that child, that 2-year-old, wakes up frightened in the middle of the night, who's there to provide comfort to them and make them feel better and reassure them? Who's there to organize their feelings when they get all discombobulated and upset? Who's there to respond for them? So if you want to be an attachment figure for the child, you have to spend substantial amounts of time with the child. Not a few hours a week, but substantial amounts of time. And what that means is when a very young child under 3 is in foster care, the foster parent has to be the child's attachment figure. That's the only way it can work developmentally. When children get returned back to their bio parents, we can navigate that transition in a way that allows the child to develop an attachment to the bio parent before they have to lose the attachment to the foster parent. So we don't want to rip kids out of one relationship and put them in another. We want to do it in a thoughtful, planful way that protects the child from the harmful effects of disruption. And the literature on disruptions is very compelling about how harmful that is to young children. So, just a point about younger children and older children. Older children are a different set of things to keep in mind because older children can sustain attachments even without regular contact. Young children can't do that. Young children have to have regular, substantial contact with their attachment figures. After kids are 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever, they can sustain attachments to people whom they're not having regular contact with. So the needs of young children in foster care are different than the needs of older children in foster care. Okay, so that's 2 two-semester courses in a few minutes. So I'm now going to turn it over to Madeline.
The science of attachment. First, brain development impacts relationships, and attachment follows a developmental process. Attachment is the young child's tendency to seek comfort, support, nurturance, and protection selectively from at least one adult caregiver. So how do we decide if an adult is an appropriate attachment figure for a young child? Does the child interact warmly and comfortably with the attachment figure? Does the attachment figure and the child share positive experiences through mutual gaze and shared smiles? The child is more often in comfortable physical contact with the attachment figure than with other adults. The child seeks comfort when stressed or distressed, preferentially from the adult. And the child responds more quickly and more fully to attachment figure than to other adults. An important note to this is that children can play happily and interact comfortably with adults without being attached to them. The point of this is that a casual observation of an enjoyable interaction may be misleading without additional information. Florida statute supports developmental research. In Florida Statute 409-145, Section 2B 1 through 3, it states that to ensure that a child in out-of-home care receives support for healthy development, which gives the child the best possible opportunity for success, caregivers, birth or legal parents, the department, and the community-based care lead agency shall work cooperatively in a respectful partnership by adhering to the following requirements. All members of the partnership must interact and communicate professionally with one another, must share all relevant information promptly, and must respect the confidentiality of all information related to the child and his or her family. As we conclude this section, there are some points I would like for you to remember. Infants are strongly biologically predisposed to form attachments to caregiving adults. Adults are strongly biologically predisposed to respond to infants. Attachment in young children develops gradually over the first several years of life based upon relationship experiences with caregivers. Under usual rearing conditions, infants develop focused or preferred attachments in the second half of the first year of life, ages 7 to 9 months. Separation protest and stranger awareness also occur during this time. In this section, we will discuss planful transitions. Transitions are when a child changes from one placement to another. In this section, we will be watching some videos on how transitions can affect the foster parent and the children. We will then go into detail on how each one of us can assist in planful transitions.
We went to court one morning, not expecting any kind of transition or move to happen, and the judge ordered our kids to be moved right away. And so, of course, my first question was, well, can we at least wait till after school? This was like 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. And we were told, no, you need to pick up the kids immediately from school, and we're going to go ahead and make that move. So, first I want you to remember, think about the trauma these kids have already experienced. They've already had loss in their lives. And in our home, I always try to let the kids know in the morning, listen, today's going to be a different day. You're not going to go to school all day. You have a doctor's appointment at 1 o'clock. I'm going to be picking you up at 12. We do this with every single child because of the experiences they've already had in their home. This day I wasn't going to be able to do that. I go to this school, and I won't forget the day that I see the children coming down the hallway with their friends, and of course the oldest says, why are you picking me up today? Why are you picking me up today? And of course I paused for a minute, and I'm like, what do I say to her? And I said, I'm actually taking you home today. And in the middle of the hallway, she starts screaming and crying. By the way, this was to a relative. In fact, I had told her, you're going with your grandparents today. Her little brother was next to her coming out of the side hallway with another friend, and he starts crying because she starts crying. The emotional impact was obviously the trauma, the crying, the not understanding why her life was being turned upside down again. Okay? So then we rush home because our house is actually a mile away from the courthouse. So of course we're rushing home. The two kids are crying in the back seat. And we're rushing around our house to try to get all their clothes and everything packed. Not taking the time to sit down and talk to them about what this transition was, where they were going, why it was important, why it should be a good thing. Instead we're worrying about packing. Our daughter was also at school that day. She didn't get to say goodbye. How many foster parents do you think would stick around for that? Today, actually, I was dropping her off. She's in middle school now. This was a couple years ago, and I asked her what that transition was like for her. And she said, I didn't get to say goodbye. So I want you guys to think about that. How many foster parents would be willing to stick around when the kids in their home are affected? Not just us, because we're the adults, but the kids.
A planful transition means that the adults who are responsible for the child's well-being, and here I'm talking about everybody involved, work together collaboratively to ensure that moving the child from one caregiving situation to another goes as smoothly as it possibly can, taking into account what's the child's developmental level, what's the current status of the child's attachment relationships with important caregivers, what's their relationship with the sending parent, what's their relationship with the receiving parent, etc. Okay, key ingredients, the 4 C's of transition: clarity, communication, collaboration, continuity. I'm going to talk about each of those briefly. So it's important that a clear plan be developed. Full disclosure with everyone involved about what the plan is, not just go pick up the child one day and drop them off at a new place. Has to be individualized based on the unique circumstances of the child and the child's relationship with these people. And no one is smart enough to come up with a plan that absolutely is going to work for this particular child. So we have to be open to adapting it and changing it as depending on how the child responds to the transition. So sometimes transitions need to be accelerated, sometimes they need to slow down. We have to be very flexible about it. Communication is really the key. Child Protective Services needs to communicate with everyone. They need to talk with the bio parent about what's happening. They need to talk with the foster parents about what's happening. They need to talk with the child about what's happening. It's critical that the biological parent and the foster parent talk together. If that can be a collaborative relationship, then everything else that follows will go as far smoother than if they don't have a collaborative relationship. Within foster care transitions, the sending foster parent and the receiving foster parent should be communicating with one another and collaborating with one another. Kids are incredibly sensitive to conflict between adults. There's a huge literature about this. They're very hypersensitive to any detection that they might have of conflict. And so if those adults are collaborating and communicating effectively, talking about what happened, talking to the child about, okay, you're going to go and spend some time with so-and-so, and then you're going to come back here and you're going to spend the night here, or you're going to go over to so-and-so's house and you're going to spend the night, and then you're going to come back here the next day. And to have each parent talking about what's happening next for the child so they can anticipate that. So all the adults involved need to be talking to the children. Collaboration begins the second the child comes into care. It continues throughout the placement, and it should continue through to return. It is very hard once these relationships between biological and foster parents go off the rails. It's very hard to get them back on the rails. So that's why the first transition when the child comes into care is so critical, because if the biological parent can feel like the foster parent is actually part of the team trying to help me, it makes a huge difference. And if the foster parent can feel like this is someone who's not just an evil adult who cruelly mistreated this child, but someone who's got their own struggles and I can be helpful to them in providing what the child needs, then it's a whole different experience. These were discussed in the foster parent panel that I hope you heard about, but 2 things that we try to encourage has been very helpful is the initial call when the child arrives at a new placement. So the receiving parent calls the sending parent. Let's say the child's coming into care. Imagine if the foster parent calls the biological parent and says, "Hello, Mrs. Jones, I'm Mrs. Smith, I'm here, I've got your boy, I just want you to know I'm going to do my best to take care of him, and I want to know if there are things that you need me to know that are important about his routines or his likes and dislikes or his diet or his medical condition or anything that I need to know that would help me." Just imagine what that does in terms of establishing a relationship between these two. And then the icebreaker meeting, which is supposed to happen within a week of the child coming into care, which is just a longer version of the phone call involving a face-to-face meeting between the sending and receiving parent. Not just when the child comes into care, but even transitions within care will hugely benefit from these kinds of things. One of the workers in Louisiana said that sometimes the biological parent doesn't have a phone, and so what she does is after she's dropped the child with the foster parent, goes back to the biological parent's house, calls the foster parent, and allows the bio parent to use her phone to talk to this foster parent about what's going on. So lots of creative possibilities when people are committed to making this work. Continuity. Continuity of relationships is important. It's much better for the child not to feel like adults just come and go and are sort of interchangeable in his or her life, but in fact can remain meaningfully involved, so that at least for a period of time after the transition, if the child can have some sort of contact, phone contact, in-person visits, whatever, or sometimes what works is really a long-term relationship with the sending parent.
So after watching those videos, the most important question to ask ourselves is, should a transition occur? So as we're thinking about that question on whether or not the transition should occur, there's some information that we need to know about transitions. Each action must support maintaining the relationship whenever possible. Transitions are difficult for all ages. Transitions are especially challenging for young children. They are developmentally vulnerable. There is no magic transition process or transition time frame that will alleviate feelings of grief, loss, fear, anxiety, etc. Even when transitions are good reasons or requested by a child or parent, they may still have complex feelings associated with them. Change is more difficult for some personalities. Setting arbitrary time frames on when transition should begin and end is ineffective because it does not support the unique needs of each person. Communication between each parent, child, and professional involved in the transition supports teaming and partnership. When transitions are non-emergency, consider other changes children and parents may be experiencing that would compound the impact of the transition. Consider the impact on all members of the family, an impact of all the loss associated with the transition, even the more extended relationships. Whenever possible, the people who know the child best and are most involved with daily care should be leading the transition plan. When age appropriate, youth can also be leading. Information sharing during transition is critical to encourage consistency. On the next slide is a video that features Eric. Eric is a youth with foster care experiences. Eric recounts a transition that adversely impacted him. It provides insight for all of us child welfare professionals and caregivers.
Well, I've been in care for a long time. Well, I was in care for a long time. And to start off, as a younger child, I was starved a lot. And well, that goes into my story. I remember this one home. I had just stolen some food because I was hungry. And the foster parents, they found out or whatever. So so they told me I had to leave or whatever. So this was a fast process too, and it was just like, it was just after Christmas too, because I remember because I got this train set, all these other toys, Pokemon was it was real cool. I just got me some cards where I thought all school was. So so they told me I had to leave, so I was at school, and my caseworker, it was this guy named Jason, I remember him. He was like, yeah, I'm coming to pick you up, and like I knew I was leaving. I was already prepared for it, like mentally, because I've been in the system for so long, and so I was at school, and I was waiting for him. It took an hour, and then I got in his car, and I was like, are we gonna get my Christmas gifts and stuff? And he was like, yeah, man, I'm gonna drop you off at your home, and you gonna get your gifts and stuff. Man, he was lying. I I ain't never get those gifts, and it hurt because I was real popular. This is elementary school. I was real popular. I had a lot of friends and stuff, and I had to leave. I mean, it sucked because not because of friends, because friends come and go. That's my mentality. But because of Christmas gifts, I ain't never get those Christmas gifts. Why? Because I had just got that train set, and it was like real expensive train set. It was real cool. But I ain't never get those gifts, and that sucked.
Florida Transitions Policy reduces the trauma of moves for children by ensuring that there is a transition plan, that there is continued contact by caregivers, and that there's the involvement of the youth in their transition plan. Once a caregiver accepts the responsibility of caring for a child, the child may be removed from the home of the caregiver only if the caregiver is clearly unable to safely or legally care for the child and the birth or legal parent are reunified, the child is being placed in a legally permanent home in accordance with a case plan or court order, or the removal is demonstrably in the best interest of the child. Transition plans require the cooperation and sharing of information among all persons involved, respect for the child's developmental stage and psychological needs, ensuring that the child has all of his or her belongings, allowing for a gradual transition from the caregiver's home, and allowing, if possible, continued contact with the caregiver after the child leaves. When the case plan for a child includes reunification, the caregiver, the department, and the community-based care lead agency must work together to assist the birth or legal parent in improving his or her ability to care for and protect the child and to provide continuity for the child. A caregiver must respect and support the child's ties to his or her birth or legal family, including parents, siblings, and extended family members, and must assist the child in maintaining allowable visitation and other forms of communication. The department and community-based care lead agency must provide a caregiver with the information, guidance, training, and support necessary for fulfilling this responsibility. Planful transition shall include, but is not limited to, the following: assessing the possible impact of transition on the child's living situation, ensuring that any change in living situation is made in a developmentally sensitive way, maintaining all relationships after a child moves from one family to another, and respecting the child's voice in the placement process. Make sure to give priority to the impact on the child when deciding whether to make changes in a child's living situation. To ensure that we have child-specific transition plans, we need to ensure that we are having transition meetings. These meetings are designed to address each child and family's needs, including to create a flexible plan that meets the child's needs, to discuss preparation considerations that address the child's personality, schedule, and relationships. Some questions to be answered at the transition meeting are: is the transition necessary? Why or why not? If it is necessary or desirable, how should we do it? Transition meetings are a cooperative meeting focused on the best interest of the child, not balancing the interests of the adults. Include the foster parent or kinship caregiver who is currently caring for the child and has critical information about the needs and personalities of the child. Except in emergency situations, the child's parents, unless contrary to court order, licensed out-of-home caregivers, and the guardian ad litem or attorney ad litem, if appointed, shall be given at least 2 weeks' notice prior to moving a child from out-of-home placement to another, and the reason a placement change is necessary. In emergency situations, a change of placement can be made immediately. The child welfare professional shall within 72 hours inform the child's parents, unless contrary to court order, children's legal services, and guardian ad litem and child's attorney if appointed, of the move and the reasons an emergency placement change was necessary. Parental notification of any placement changes shall be documented in FISFIN unless the court previously excused the department from further efforts to locate. If the parent is unable to be located, efforts to locate and notify the parent shall be documented in FISFIN. The child welfare professional shall provide supportive services to the caregiver where the child is residing to avoid a change in placement when possible. When a placement is in danger of disrupting, the child welfare professional shall urge the caregiver to wait to request removal of the child until efforts can be made to remedy the reason for the child's instability. When efforts to stabilize a placement have not been successful, or there are circumstances that preclude the child's continued stay, the child welfare professional will work with the caregiver to reach an agreement on a move date that takes into consideration the following needs of the child. There is a break in the school year. An alternative placement can be located, and arrangements for the child's transition to the new setting can be made and implemented. The caregiver at the new placement shall be prepared and informed prior to placement of the child and shall be given needed support to help the child transition and achieve stability. Out-of-home caregivers shall be given all relevant information about the child in their care while maintaining confidentiality requirements. Specifically, the child welfare professional shall inform the caregiver of all identified needs of the child, discuss any training the caregiver may need to care for the child, including any special needs of the child and possible reactions to the specific trauma that the child has experienced. Discuss any services that the child may need and the role of the out-of-home caregiver with regard to transportation, participation in treatment sessions, communication with treatment providers, and potential implementation of treatment recommendations in the home. Inform the out-of-home caregiver about available programs that may provide financial and medical assistance for the child. Provide the out-of-home caregiver with counseling and information regarding the dependency process and support services available in the community. Review with the licensed out-of-home caregivers their roles and responsibilities according to the Partnership Plan for Children in License of Out-of-Home Care, incorporated in paragraph 65C 2804 6C FAC. The child welfare professional shall sign a copy of the partnership plan and obtain a signature of the licensed out-of-home caregiver attesting acknowledgement of the requirements at the time of placement, and provide to the out-of-home caregiver the child's resource record. The child's resource record from the previous placement shall be reviewed with the out-of-home caregiver upon the child's new placement. The child welfare professional shall discuss with the out-of-home caregiver the caregiver's role in maintaining and updating the child's resource record.
Yeah, so for me, I think what I wanted to talk about and address is that a lot of times when youth are in homes, it's so easy to just move placements again and again because of behavior. And the thing is, it's like you're taking in a child who's dealt with so much trauma. Like, I don't understand what makes people think that this child is going to be the perfect child. You have traumas. You were ripped from your home. You were ripped from any connections that you had. So, of course, there's going to be traumas and there's going to be difficulties that you're going to need to address. And there's this quote that one of the ILP directors once said was, "The ones who need the most love show it in the most unlovable way." And that is so true. When I was my current foster mom, with her, when I first moved in, there's the honeymoon period, and then little by little that trust is being built, and so I felt more comfortable with her. And the very first major argument we had was big. I was 15 years old. I was a lot of attitude, everything, the whole deal. And so as soon as our argument was over, like I was in my room packing my bag because I was like, oh, like I'm not gonna stay here because she's probably gonna kick me out. And to like my surprise, she didn't kick me out. And like that to me was like shocking because my own mother put me in the system. Like she like dropped me off at the county. So it was like for me that trauma was already there. So I had already figured they're just gonna put me in another home, but they didn't. And so I feel like that's the message we need to give to other youth is that we're not gonna give up on you, even when you have traumas, even when you have this, when you have that. We're gonna stay there, stick by your side, just like you would your own child. You wouldn't call the cops on your child for throwing a tantrum. So why are you gonna call the cops on another youth?
The types of transitions are transition into care, transition out of care, meaning reunification, non-urgent transition from one foster placement to another, transition to geographically distant placement, transition to adoptive home, and non-relative to non-relative, non-relative to relative, relative to non-relative, and relative to relative. When a child transitions into care, plan if possible. However, urgency may preclude planning. Throughout, monitor your own reactions. Learn as much as you can about the child from the biological parents. Explain the move to the child. Provide a narrative. And let the child ask questions. Call the biological parent on the child's arrival to the caregiver, and schedule an icebreaker. Transition out of care. This is when the child is being reunified. Child transitions home when the parties generally agree that the parent has made sufficient progress on their case plan, parents are ready for unsupervised longer visits, and when a caregiver already has an established relationship with the child and has visited consistently. In the next two slides, you're going to watch two videos. The first video is a foster parent and a father discussing how positive the transition was for the child going from the foster parent to the father. The next slide you're going to watch is a dependency judge that's going to talk to you about how important it was for her to hear that a foster parent continue their relationship with the child and be a support for the parent after the placement has ended.
And it was so good for our biological children who live in the house because they saw that Brantley had a home he needed to go home to, and that his dad loved him so much to be dedicating so much time and energy to him. So it was huge. The day that Brantley left, Josh stayed the night that night. It was very important that we wanted Brantley to wake up in the middle of the night and know that it was safe to look in his dad's face and not just be our face. The next morning when he pulled out with him, we cried, not happy, sad tears, right? It was bittersweet. We knew he was going to a good home. We knew this was the goal that we had all fought for, but we were going to miss him, and we didn't know what the future would hold. And so it was a little scary and sad. But the kids did say, Mama, Josh did it, he went home. And so we knew we had done something right. And you probably didn't feel as nervous and scared, right? Because...
No, it was definitely a good transition, the way we did it.
Yeah.
If we had did it the way that they wanted us to do it, it'd have been a year.
Yeah, it would have been a year, and visits in the visitation center. He never did one visit in the visitation center. It was nice, and now we have this really close relationship. I mean, a couple hours after when you got him home, you sent me the picture of him asleep in the swing, and you were like, we made it home, he's asleep.
You could tell it was a good transition, the way, it wasn't like he just got handed off to me and didn't know me. I'd spent so much time with him, he knew me, he was comfortable with me, he knew I was his dad, and, when he came home with me, it was like he hadn't missed a beat, it was just like he was the exact same person who was at Molly's house.
I find much joy in continuing the relationships that will extend beyond my term as a dependency judge. I've had one situation arise where the foster dad has a fishing date set up with the child, even though the child has been reunified with the mother. That relationship with the foster dad and their joint mutual love of fishing was really important, and that has continued successfully to this day. Also, we have a case where a foster mom continued, even after the children were reunited with the mother, continued as the default babysitter so that the children who she loved could continue their relationship with her. And also, she had mentored the mother throughout the dependency process. And that continued relationship between the foster mom and the mother was also very important to the both of them.
Transition from foster home to foster home. Foster parents are strongly encouraged to participate in the process. Older children should be included if possible. Consider the child's age and developmental level and explain the reason for the move. Provide opportunities for the child to visit the new caregivers and see where they will live. Have the child call his or her parents when she arrives at the new placement. Arrange face-to-face meeting as soon as possible. Make sure that the child has all of their belongings. The sending foster parent should participate in the move if possible. The sending foster parent should remain in the child's life and, if possible, visit after the move. Allow the child to say goodbye to caregivers and important connections. When there is a change in placement from non-relative to non-relative, non-relative to a relative, relative to non-relative, or relative to relative, the caregivers are strongly encouraged to participate in the process. Even when the caregivers are relatives, the child may not already have an attached relationship. Older children should be included if possible. Consider the child's age and developmental level and explain the reason for the move. Provide opportunities for the child to visit the new caregivers and see where they will live. Initial call when child arrives at new placement. Face-to-face meeting as soon as possible. Remember the child's belongings. The sending caregiver should participate in the move if possible. The sending caregiver should remain in the child's life and, if possible, visit after the move. Allow the child to say goodbye to caregivers and important connections. Transition to geographically distant placement. The placement should make sense for the child, must be in the child's best interest. Needs of the child must be the #1 priority. Adults should bear the burden when necessary. Consider the attachment between the caregiver and the child in planning, and utilize virtual visits. When transitioning a child to an adoptive home, this transition should be carefully planned. Younger children should add new attachment before losing current attachment. Try to maintain contact with previous placement if it involved an important attachment or relationship for the child. In the next slide, you will see a video of foster parents and their experience with the transitioning of an adoptive child.
Like he said, we know of 11 placements. We really think it's more considering what she'd been through with her biological family. When she moved in with me, when she was returned to care after being adopted, I was her 4th placement in 2 months. The consistent message for 6 months had to be everybody on the team was, because she told me, she walked in, I'm just testing you out. I'm going to let you know if I'm going to stay or not. Our wonderful recruiter found Roberto and his wife, and I can't tell you how much these people are her parents. We couldn't introduce them as potential adoptive parents. We said they are mentors for you to give you a break from Anna, because then Anna gets on your nerves. So she's like, heck yes. So our first meeting, I think
we planned it for like a week.
Oh yeah.
It was back and forth. What would she like? What will she in what situation will she feel comfortable. So we decided to go to the mud walk in Seminole County, and it was Anna, KK, her two nephews, two of her friends, Jennifer, the caseworker, Jennifer's husband, and then Becky and me. All those people came together to make sure that she had a good first meeting with us. The first time that she stayed with us, that was also a big transition, emails back and forth. I work for Disney, so I had tickets for Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween party. We planned to just take her and then take her back to Anna's, but we were hoping that she would stay with us. An hour before we were going to leave, her brother called. He at the time was 20, KK was 12, and it was like a surprise. Okay, her brother is coming. But that was good because she was not going to be by herself. So it was a great experience. After that weekend, she stayed with us every single weekend, including Thanksgiving and the Christmas holidays until February. That as a team, again, it was about 5 or 6 people, we decided that it was time for her to move in with us.
They came to my house and we told her together.
On a Wednesday.
He knows all the details. And she was not happy about it. And she looked at me and said, Anna, you are giving up on me. You're giving up on me. And I said, sweetheart, no, I'm not. All I can do is give you time. These wonderful people decided not to take her out of the school that she was going to when she was living with me. I live in Oviedo, for those of you familiar with Central Florida. They live by SeaWorld. Was that
right down here, about 10 minutes away.
So it was like an hour drive to my house. So we moved her to their house. They would drive her to my house every morning. She'd take the bus, go to school, come home. Once in a while I'd drive him home, but I'm not going to take any credit because it was all him.
Almost her entire life that she had in Oviedo, we've been able to maintain that her best friends, her sleepovers and parties and all that. So
Youth were interviewed and asked for their input regarding transition planning. These were their recommendations. If a foster parent or residential facility submits a 30-day notice to transition the youth to another placement, the youth, peer advocate, GAL, and therapist shall be notified within 5 days. If there is an opportunity to resolve the situation, the case manager shall schedule a time for the youth, peer advocate, and other team members to meet with the caregiver to develop a placement stability plan. If the youth is unable to remain in the placement, the case manager should develop a transition plan with the youth that ensures the child has all of his or her belongings, allows for a gradual transition from the caregiver's home, and, if possible, for continued contact with the caregiver after the child leaves. When and how to tell a child or youth that they will be transitioning should be done on a case-by-case basis to minimize negative reactions or behavioral emotional triggers, which immediate or short-term transition plans put in place. The lead agencies should have the ability to engage in conflict resolution between foster parents and young people before a transition decision is made. All parties that are to receive notification should first consider if an educational transition is in the best interest of the youth. Before changing a child-youth educational setting as per statute, Florida Administrative Code, the CBC and/or its subcontracted agencies, if appropriate, must hold an educational best interest staffing to determine if the change in school setting is appropriate and if the school system can assist with transportation to the new educational setting. Parties are to ensure that the IEP is adhered to and accurately updated. The greatest effort to maintain the child in an educational environment that is progressive for that child. A clear MOU should be housed between the school districts and the CBC to facilitate the transition planning regarding education. Transitions for youth in care can bring up feelings of rejection, past trauma, grief and loss, and attachment issues to the surface. Therefore, clinical services are critical. Youth need access to therapeutic services during the traumatic time of transition. Youth recommended that, like having one case manager, they should have one therapist during their time in foster care. To the extent possible, and with appropriate transfer practice in place, so that the youth are not left without clinical support. Also, youth should have input into the decision-making process of their therapist based on individual needs. It is recommended that training on transitions be required and include foster parents, residential care providers, therapists, and guardian ad litems who work with this population. Youth council leaders should be invited to speak at these trainings or provide a video sharing their perspective on the issue. Young adults with lived experience within the OVI network of youth councils express a desire to support other youth ages 13 to 17 by connecting them with a peer advocate upon initial placement in care. If a youth is having difficulty at their placement, they can contact their peer advocate for guidance and support to try to maintain stability. Rolling out this recommendation will require that the lead agency must ensure that there is an active youth council in their circuit and referrals are made to the point person for the youth council. Lead or provider agencies may seek funding and training for peer advocates through Medicaid or the general revenue. This would be a voluntary program with training and support provided for peer advocates.
Group home. I was 17. I remember it was in October because I was just gonna turn 18. Had 2 weeks left, and my auntie, I call her my auntie, but she was pretty much the supervisor in my case. We were real close because we've been together for so long. And she was like, you know, there's this home, whatever. And I had a friend that stayed with them because they had adopted one of my friends. You know, she was real cool. She, you know, I went to my friend's birthday party. You know, we just hit it off because they have a big family. It was a family of 8. Eight, and it was just real cool. And you know, since then, you know, we just hit it off, and then we got the process done. You know, because I had people, you know, that just knew what they was doing. So we got the process done. I got the 2 weeks, and then when did I get adopted? I got adopted on the 3rd of November. And since then I've been happy. You know, they actually encouraged me to get back into school because I was real far behind. I was down 9 credits last year, and I didn't think I was gonna make it. I wanted to get my GED or whatever. They encouraged me, and I got my high school diploma. You know, all A's and B's. You know. I'm in college now, and yeah, that's pretty much, you know, this is my best transition that I've gotten to so far.
In conclusion, I would like to review a summary of major points. Be sure that a transition is necessary and in the child's best interest. When children come into care, make a diligent search for family and try to move the child as quickly as possible. After 3 months in a stable, non-relative or relative, be cautious about moving children less than 6 years old, unless it is clearly in the child's best interest. Disrupting established healthy attachment increases risk for harm, and the more disruptions, the greater the risk. To develop and sustain healthy attachments, young children must have substantial amounts of interaction with an adult where the adult repeatedly comforts the child when frightened, stressed, distressed, or has mixed feelings and behavior. Don't confuse comfortable and playful with attachment. Ask, who is the go-to person for this child? Center efforts around minimizing harm to the child. Involve sending and receiving caregivers whenever possible. And make sure you talk with everyone involved frequently. The third and final section of this training is supporting relationships through comfort calls. Supporting relationships is legally required. In order to ensure that children in out-of-home care achieve legal permanency as soon as possible, to reduce the likelihood that they will re-enter care or that other children in the family are abused or neglected or enter out-of-home care, and to ensure that families are fully prepared to resume custody of their children, the Department and community-based care lead agencies shall develop and support relationships between caregivers and birth or legal parents of children in out-of-home care to the extent that it is safe and in the child's best interest. Practices that are specifically defined in legislation are 1. Facilitating telephone communication between the caregiver and the birth or legal parent as soon as possible. Facilitating and attending an in-person meeting between the caregiver and the birth or legal parent as soon as possible. Developing and supporting a plan for the birth or legal parent to participate in activities and events involving the child. Facilitating participation by the caregiver in visitation between the birth or legal parent and the child. Involving the caregiver in planning meetings with the birth or legal parent. Developing and implementing effective transition plans. And supporting continued contact between the caregiver and the child after the child leaves. All members of the partnership must interact and communicate professionally with one another, must share all relevant information promptly, and must respect the confidentiality of all information related to the child and his or her family. How can comfort calls make a difference for children and their parents? Comfort calls can reduce the stress of divided loyalty, help regulate children's behavior by reducing anxiety, ensure that families have all the information they need, makes it easier for children to go home, relieves parents' anxiety and enables them to resolve their issues, and makes the children feel safer. Child welfare professionals' action during removal. When the social worker prepares to leave the parent's house with the child, he tells them she will call to say the child is all right. The comfort call is a phone call made by an agency representative and foster parent or kin or fictive kin to the birth parent after a child is removed from their home. The purpose of these calls is to comfort the child, take the first step in establishing a positive co-parenting relationship between the foster parent and birth parents, discuss vital information needed to meet the child's needs. This call also provides an opportunity for the child and parent to speak to each other after removal, which can help both to feel more comfortable with the placement. Agency staff should help to set guidelines with the parents for appropriate conversations, and the phone should be on speakerphone. The child health social form should be provided to the foster parent with all information previously gathered. The foster parent can then fill in the blanks based on the information gathered during the comfort call. Comfort calls should be made to parents whenever a child enters a new home or placement. The call should always occur within 12 hours, if at all possible, after the child is removed from their home. Otherwise, the call should occur no later than 48 hours after removal. During the call, the foster parent should allow the birth parent to be the expert on their child by discussing information needed to meet the child's needs, such as medical. Do they have any allergies? Are they on any medications? Do they have any upcoming or needed appointments? Are they up to date on their immunizations, etc.? Behavioral. What are some of their past trauma? What is their placement history? What is their therapeutic history? Are they in counseling or have they had counseling in the past? Educational and developmental. What school did the child attend? What teachers did the child have? What was their academic performance? Did they have any special services? Do they have an IEP or a 504? Family, fictive kin, peer support systems. Who else can the child call for support? This can include a coach, a mentor, a pastor, anybody that the child considers important in their support system. Routines. What extracurricular activities do they do? Do they have specific schedules? Do they have specific bedtimes? Set up an icebreaker and a first in-person visit, and let the child speak with their parent. Agency staff should help to set guidelines with the parents for appropriate conversations, and the phone should always be on speakerphone. The Child Health Social History form should be provided to the foster parent with all information previously gathered. The foster parent can then fill in the blanks based on the information gathered during the comfort call. Here are some general guidelines for the comfort call. The Child Protective Investigator or agency staff who facilitates the removal of the child from the home should discuss the upcoming comfort call with the birth parent. This includes the best number to contact the parent, when to expect the call, the purpose of the call, and general expectations and guidelines. The comfort call can be made in a variety of ways, from the staff member's work cell phone at the foster home, if the foster parent is comfortable with it, from the foster parent's phone, or through Google Voice. Begin the call by reminding the birth and foster parents that the purpose is to provide important information that may be only known by the birth parent to make sure the foster parent can provide the best possible care and provide the birth parent with information about the family the child is living with. Introduce birth and foster parents by providing first and last names unless specific safety issues exist. Then utilize first names only. Encourage the foster parents to acknowledge positive attributes, appearance, manners of the child. The case manager should remain near the phone and utilize speakerphone to monitor information shared and to intervene if necessary. The caseworker can assist in redirecting conversations as needed to support continuation of the call and to maintain focus on the child and not on removal or other issues. If the call becomes inappropriate and the caseworker is unable to redirect, the call should be terminated. In concluding the call, acknowledge the difficulty of establishing this new relationship and highlight that the initial face-to-face meeting will be easier having had this conversation. Reiterate how beneficial it is to share important information and alleviate fears and anxieties through direct communication. When back in the office, enter information about the comfort call in a case note, including whether the call occurred, who participated, what was discussed, and whether all parties were appropriate. If the comfort call did not occur, document this in a case note as well and explain why it did not occur. Outcomes of comfort calls minimizes trauma of separation for both child and parents, sets the stage for an ongoing focus on the child, reinforces that the birth parent is the expert on their child, provides for a smoother transition into the foster home by allowing the foster parents to ask about specific information pertinent to their home environment and routines, reassures the parents that the child will be well cared for and that the foster parent is committed to helping the family reunify, provides birth parents the opportunity to convey in their own words the information they feel is critical for the care of their child, initiates and promotes immediate communication between foster parents and birth parents, humanizes stranger foster parents or sets the tone for a new relationship between the kinship caregiver and birth parent. It also establishes a positive working relationship early in the case by developing trust and open and honest communication. As with anything else in life, you're going to run into some unique circumstances. Here are some unique circumstances and how we are to overcome those barriers. Hospitalized or incarcerated birth parents. Depending upon the hospital, treatment center, detention facility, criminal charges, contact with an explanation of the purpose and procedures of the initial call with the physician, nurse, social worker, jail warden may allow for a brief or modified call. It doesn't hurt to ask. If the call cannot be conducted immediately due to hospitalization or incarceration, the initial call should be made as soon as possible once the birth parent is released or able to have such a call. Parents' whereabouts unknown. When a parent is located, the initial call with the foster parent should be done immediately to exchange information, reduce trauma for the child, and demonstrate trust and establishment of the relationship between caregivers. Safety concerns. Unfortunately, there may be rare situations where there are confirmed significant safety issues and risks which may preclude the initial call or require modification to the call procedures. When such situations exist, the caseworker shall discuss with the worker's supervisor the specific safety concerns, jointly assessing options and possible procedural modifications that would allow the call to occur safely. After learning about QPI, you must ensure that every child receives excellent parenting every day. By working in respectful partnership with team members, incorporating knowledge regarding the importance of child development and attachment, and using QPI principles to guide relationship building and decision making, excellent parenting becomes the expectation. Remember, QPI begins with you.